All right. So, as my dad and I were brainstorming for this podcast and just thinking about what we wanted to talk about, we realized that when it comes to taking the next step in your life and your career, a lot of that comes down to learning how to manage different tensions going on in your life and balancing different things that are wanting to pull you one way or the other. So, we want to take this episode to introduce some specific tensions that we're going to discuss deeper in the future through interviews and deeper conversations, and just kind of introduce why they're important and hopefully give you a good idea of why we want to talk about tensions. So, Dad, when I hear you speak, I hear you talk a lot about how, as a leader, you have to manage the tensions going on within your team or your organization. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. Matter of fact, I was with 15 leaders in Denver, and we were going through some leadership development, and the topic of tensions comes up. And, these are smart people. These, folks that have degrees in engineering, master degree level leaders in their organization. And when we talk about the idea of tensions, it starts to blow their mind, because here's the thing about attention. Attention says that the answer to a problem may not exist. Like, you might not have a problem that actually has a solution, but it's instead a tension that needs to be managed. And so we look at these, you kind of look at two sides of a category. So here's an example. Everyone wants their boss to be clear with them, right? You've worked enough in the professional environment. You want your boss to be clear, give you objectives and goals, right?
Yep.
And you also want your boss to give you autonomy and flexibility and to be flexible. Agree?
Yes.
So if you want your boss to be clear and you want them to be flexible, you can see how those two are at odds with one another. And so oftentimes leaders will say, well, which is it? Do you want me to be clear or you want me to be flexible? And I'm like, yeah, I want you to be both. And so the only reason that you want someone to be clear is really because of the negative effect of the other side tension. So the negative effect of being too flexible is that you're wishy-washy. You don't stand for something. You're not given clear objectives and goals. Resources aren't available. And so all of a sudden you see this negative effect of being too flexible. So then your answer is, oh my gosh, I must now go and be clear. Okay, so then you're clear, and I give clear expectations and boundaries and guidelines, and I tell you what to do and how to do it. And well, all of a sudden that becomes a negative effect of being too clear. So now you're rigid and you're inflexible and you're not allowing my creativity to work. And so all of a sudden we get these negative effects of being too clear. So then boom, we got to go over here and be flexible. And you just go back and forth. And the idea of managing those polarities, managing those tensions, is that what you want to do is you want to get the upside of both sides without any of the negative effect of either one of them. So as a young professional, you want to be able to not, one, be clear with those that are around you and be flexible and get the best of both of those. And the way I like to look at that is one side is like inhaling and the other side is like exhaling. And so if you all you do is inhale, then you're going to suffocate. So you got to get into this pattern of inhale, exhale, and really doing both of them in a meaningful, patterned way. Does that make sense?
Yeah. The first time I heard you talk about the idea of tensions, it really kind of blew my mind in a way, because I feel like a lot of times it's true. Like, we kind of feel like you have to be one way or the other. And the truth is to be successful, you kind of have to manage both in a lot of situations. And it also got me thinking how, like, not only when you're managing teams, but when you're managing and leading your own life, there's tensions going on in your own life that you have to learn how to manage. And when we first started this podcast, I sent out kind of a little questionnaire to a bunch of people my age, just asking what kind of struggles do they deal with as a young professional and what kind of things do they want us to talk about. And I got a lot of responses that were similar from people just talking about different tensions. So I just want to dive into a few of these and kind of have some small discussions on them. So first of all, I think a lot of people my age deal with the struggle of the grind, the hustle culture, being up early, going to bed late, sacrificing a lot to work really hard versus the long haul in terms of your mental health and your getting things like what the end goal versus grinding right now. What would you have to say about that? What do you wish you would have known dealing with that tension?
Well, as a young professional myself, I wanted to set the world on fire. If my company came to me and asked me to put their logo tattooed on my back, I would have. I mean, I was just absolutely bent to become the CEO and to do the best I could. And so I wanted to hustle, and I went to work early, and I went to stayed late, and there's a bunch of stuff that I did sacrifice, and it wasn't all bad. So that hustle is, I think, important. Also, as I got older and started having different priorities and different commitments, I realized that, back to the whole sacrifice thing, is that I couldn't be amazing in my personal life if I didn't sacrifice some at my work, and vice versa. So what I wish I would have known was better how to allocate my resources, how to better understand, what does hustle mean. And I think there's some confusion today that hustle means I've got to go create some side hustle. I got to go, build something that, is going to gain me 250,000 followers, and I can become, an influencer, or, start a business and hustle, grind. And what I would like to go back in time is to say, hustle isn't bad. Hustle really is about being hungry and allocating your resources appropriately. So I think it's absolutely crucial to hustle and to go above and beyond and to prove yourself and to create an opportunity for yourself. But I also think you have to keep in mind what's most important to you. So I think it's important to figure out what are those areas that you're willing to and should hustle in. Where should you be hungry? And when you can figure those out, then you can then hustle away. So in my situation, faith, family, my business, then hustle away. Anything outside of that doesn't get any energy. Doesn't mean that it's never going to get any energy. 20 years later now, I get to give a little bit more attention and effort to the things that are outside of that, like being involved in the community, being involved in my kids' school, being involved in personal things that I want to do. But at that point, like, hustle, but hustle within a defined category, so you know what that looks like, and put your energy and effort where it makes the most sense for you.
Yeah, that's great. I think the biggest thing I take away from that is establishing your priorities in life. It goes back to when we had that conversation a year ago where I said I want to give 100% into everything I do, into my running, into my school, into my work, into my relationships. And it honestly got to a point where I have too much going on, and then I burn myself out, and all those areas start to struggle. So I think that's another thing to keep in mind is, if you have your priorities that you're willing to hustle towards and you find yourself always feeling burnt out, maybe you need fewer priorities and narrow that down even more. So the next tension that I want to talk about is the idea of your confidence and your ego in conflict with humility and service. And one of my friends reached back out to me after I sent him the questions, and he said, I think a lot of young people struggle with wanting to have a really serious impact right away where they work and have a really important role. And they believe that they're capable of having an important role. And it's hard for them to accept the fact that they may need to be kind of a lower tier foot soldier at the start and work their way up. And so what would you say to someone who feels like they have the confidence to be really important in their company or whatever they're pursuing, but they need to accept that you kind of have to earn that?
Well, I think that the thing I would say in that is maybe it's not that you need to earn it, is that you need to stack up some results. Results covers a multitude of sins. And so your confidence allows you to achieve those results. But when you're at the front end of your career or the front end of an organization, your objective is to make other people look good, not necessarily to make you look good. And I think that's the challenge there, is that everybody wants to go and look good immediately themselves. And I can tell you from experience and from what I see is young professionals who have an ability to make others around them look really good. They get more opportunities to help others around them look really good. And then they get more opportunities to help others around them look really good. And so that exuberance, that hustle, that confidence can come across as ego. I think of it like a water spout. Like you're going down a hallway and you have one of those water fountains that helps you fill a water bottle up. You put it up underneath it and it gives a perfect flow into your water bottle. And so you're filling a water bottle, but sometimes you can have too little of water and you stand there for 30 minutes and it drives you crazy. But sometimes that flow could be so hard, it's blowing water everywhere. And what you want to figure out with your confidence and with your ego is, what's that perfect amount of flow that makes it almost unrecognizable to others, but it feeds into the success that you want to have. And, I think that the question I would ask myself if I'm a young professional is, who can I make look good today? And what does my boss need from me today? And put your energy and effort into that. Because if you're putting your energy and effort into how can I look good, likely that won't happen.
Yeah, yeah, that's great. That really reminds me of your point talking about how to do what's in front of you to the best of your ability. Do what you need to be doing right now instead of being so worried about the future. And if you focus on the job that's in front of you, those opportunities will come. So the next tension that I think is really apparent, especially in kids my age, my generation, with all of this access to content and chances to go learn more and perfect what you want to do, it's this tension of execution and action versus ideas and brainstorming. I think when a lot of people my age, they get an idea to do something or create something, and then it's tempting to just push that off because it seems like there's just more and more they can learn about it to perfect it. And so when do you go all in on this idea of whether it's a business or a new career you want to pursue or whatever it is? When do you go all in on that, kind of just jumping in head first? And when do you know that you need to learn more before you do that?
Well, that question has its own tension. I don't know that there's an answer to it. I think that this is part of like what wants to happen is the great question there. So oftentimes people want something to happen and they keep coming upon roadblock after roadblock after roadblock. Like I want to, start a new business, or I want to create some content and go and sell it, but nobody wants to buy it. And so what you have to pay attention to is what wants to happen. And when you can figure out what wants to happen, then you have to feed that. And so the ideas and the brainstorming and the learning, that's not a problem at all. But the only reason, and literally the only reason that you should be doing that, if you want to be successful in your life, is so that you can turn those ideas into something that's actionable, and then you can execute on it. And so I think that the question here is, how do I take what I know and do something with it? Maybe how do I do something with it with what I'm functioning in now? How do I take what I'm learning and apply that to my current job? I remember Andy Stanley, who's a pastor in Atlanta, Georgia, has a saying, and he says, "I would much rather hire a doer than a thinker. It's easier to teach a doer how to do something than to activate a thinker." And I think at this point in the world today, especially with young professionals, I think we have too many thinkers and not enough doers. And the world is really favors the doer, favors the action oriented person. And so all this content and all of this information and all of this knowledge, we have people who know more about more than ever any time in history, but we don't have enough people who are willing to go do something with it. So it goes back to that hustle culture. Like, where are you going to do something with what you know so that you can add value, and look around and say, what wants to happen, what needs to happen, and how can I go actually do something with that? Does that, like, can you see that play out with folks that are like your friends and people that you're around?
Definitely. I think it's a great reminder that sometimes the best way to learn more and to get a better idea of what you want to do is by just doing it. And the more you try to learn before you do, the more it just lags on and keeps you from actually taking action on this thing you want to do. But when you just say, I'm going to do it, even though I know that it's not going to be perfect right away, that's how you learn the most. Like, I think this podcast we're doing is a great example. It's an idea I had for a while and pushed off for a couple months, and just kept saying, like, well, we need to perfect what we want to talk about and what the name needs to be and everything. And it wasn't until we really decided, like, screw it, we're just going to record the first episode and go from here. Like, we've been learning more as we just have decided to jump right into it.
Yeah. Well, what this comes down to is, like, think of entrepreneurs. There's a lot of people that want to work in a startup culture, right? I mean, that's sexy. It's fun. Startup culture is great. I think in this conversation, startup culture may have done more harm than it's done good, because a lot of people that are in startups, they're more fascinated with raising money for their business than they are actually serving the people that they're trying to serve with their business. And so round one, round two of funding, and we get these millions of dollars and we're growing and things are great. What if your mindset was, I'm going to let my customers fund my business? What if instead of going to a bank or going to investors, I'm going to provide something of value immediately that customers want. And when they want it, I'm going to sell it to them for more than it cost me. And that profit's going to allow me to buy more of those things, to sell more to those customers, and to think about, immediately adding value into the world versus immediately adding ideas into the world. And then surrounding yourself with people who can do that. I can tell you for sure, as a young professional, some of you want to be in charge. You want to be the leader. You want to be the first in charge. But being a second in command, or being the person who's helping others accomplish those goals, is significantly more valuable inside of an organization, because there's only so many that can be the first in command.
Yeah, definitely. Well, this conversation hopefully has been a great taste of kind of what future conversations are going to look like around this idea of tensions. And hopefully today, just through these few ideas we talked about, we helped you realize maybe some tensions that are going on in your life that maybe you need to work on or improve. And I would just encourage you, after listening to this, just think, where do you lean too strongly in one direction of these tensions, and write down things that you can do to even that out and improve that area of your life. And if you can think of any other tensions that are hard to manage or that you're personally dealing with in life, like, reach out to us. We want to talk about them, and we're very curious about. We're very interested in talking about practical things that people are actually dealing with.
Yeah. Well, my suggestion, my last parting thought, was to take a skill that you have and grow it versus trying to spread that across a lot of things. Like, if you have good interpersonal skills and you have the ability to relate well with one another, and you have a high EQ and a high relationship intelligence, take that skill and scale it. Get into a job where you're building relationships, where you're selling things, and get really good at selling things, whether it's selling an idea, selling motivation, selling a product or a service, and grow it. So my suggestion for everyone today is to take a skill and go scale it and expand it versus trying to grow 15 more skills. Because the deeper you get into a skill, the more you exercise that skill, the more you perfect that skill, the easier it is to add another skill at another date. But instead of spreading yourself thin, go all in on one and perfect that.